If we're to spend 40 to 50 hours a week, over 10,000 hours a year, we're going to want to choose a career that we're best at and one that we love. And with the average American changing their jobs up to 7 times during their lifetime, finding the right career as soon as possible will contribute to better health and help you live a richer and fuller life. The right career is out there waiting for you, and I'm going to help you find it. I'm Freddy Cochran. Welcome to California Careers. Welcome to another edition of California Careers. I'm Freddy Cochran, your host. We're in Hollywood, California today with criminal defense attorney Daniel Perlman. Hello, Daniel.
Hey, Freddie. How you doing?
Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you being here. Very cool. Very excited to be here.
Glad to have you.
What is an attorney? Let's see. What is a lawyer?
Wow. Why a dictionary definition? I think of myself as I'm here to help people, and I have a license to do that, and they call me an attorney or a lawyer. I went to school and got a degree in law. It's called a Juris Doctor, which gave me that, plus my bar credentials give me a license to help people with legal problems.
Okay. You alluded to your schooling. Let's talk about that. What schooling do I need to become a lawyer?
Well, in the United States, you're looking at your 4-year bachelor's degree, and it can be in anything. Mine was in psychology. And then you need a 3-year law degree. Okay. And that's at a law school, and there's close to 200 accredited law schools in the country and a number of unaccredited ones. And then once you finish law school, we have something called archaic. It's like a guild, but we call it the bar. And in order to be a member of the bar, you have to go through a hazing exercise. It's called a bar exam. Once you pass that, you can call yourself an attorney.
Let's talk about that exam. So, let me back up for a minute. So we need a 4-year bachelor's degree, and the major can be in anything.
Anything.
Okay. Once we graduate with a bachelor's degree, now that's a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Arts, we apply to law school.
Correct.
Is there an admission test that we need to take before we get into law school?
There is. It's called the LSAT or LSAT.
Okay.
And it's a similar format to the SATs you took to go to college or even earlier tests in your scholastic career. It's a 1-day exam that tests you on your verbal comprehension and your writing ability, and to a certain extent I think there's some math in there too. Okay. But it's mostly focused on your comprehension and your logic skills.
Okay, so based on the LSAT and your cumulative GPA, is that what the law admission team is looking at, whether or not you're going to get the green light to get in?
There is some kind of a nexus between those two factors. Mm-hmm. There's also some X factors involved, but yes, your GPA cross-referenced with your LSAT score is the two single biggest factors for getting into the law school of your choice. But they're also looking at a writing sample. They're also looking at what you've been doing with your time, if there's a gap between schooling. They're also looking at your letters of reference and recommendation. I think those played a role in what I ended up doing with law school. Okay. So there are other outside factors.
Okay. Do you recommend taking sort of a prep course for the LSAT, or can I just go to like Borders and buy a $20 book on the prep, or how would you advise prepping for that exam?
That's a great question. I think exam prep is a very individual thing. If you want to buy into the prep classes, if that helps you stay motivated and on task and doing something for it every day, then the classes are probably a great option. They are expensive and they are regimented. I bought, I think it was the Kaplan book for the LSAT, and I was very into it. And I carried around a deck of 3x5 cards with vocabulary words, and I stayed on it myself. I remember sitting like in the jacuzzi one night. I'm going through these cards.
Nice.
Nothing I would ever consider doing today, but I think you do need some kind of structure. The reason these courses and these books exist is because there's a wealth of information about what's appeared on the test previously, and that can be a great predictor of what you're going to face. And so you do want some of their materials. You don't want to wing it, but you have to gauge yourself what type of person you are, and if you study best with a classroom environment or on your own, it's up to you.
Okay, so let's say that we take the LSAT, we get a decent score. Now, if I sort of bomb that sucker, is that going to bar my chances sort of to get into school, or should I retake it, or what if I don't get a very good score on that exam?
They've changed it a bit, Freddie, since I took it. I know there's been some even substantial changes. When I took it, I believe the method was you could retake the exam, but what would happen is that you would get an average of the scores. I'm the wrong authority for this.
Okay, I think I heard something about that too, about the potential averaging for the LSAT. Let's move on. So let's say we get into law school. Now, the law school process, is it as hard as all the horror stories are out there? Or what goes on in law school? What are they teaching us in there?
Well, I don't think it matches up with Scott Turow's 1L, and it doesn't match up with the great movie The Paper Chase.
Okay.
Both are advisable if you're considering law school, I think, but those are extremes. They're Hollywood, both of them, I think. I was greatly looking forward to returning to a scholastic career when I went to law school. It was not what I experienced as an undergrad. You know, I went to UC Santa Barbara, which is
The Gauchos.
Go Gauchos! It's a demanding school, but it's also a relaxed atmosphere. It's known as a big party school, which actually I think is a great regiment, because if you can survive Santa Barbara, then you can probably survive anything.
Can you survive the next day after Halloween?
Right,
in
exactly.
Santa Barbara.
That's right. Those are some wild times. But I'll tell you, the thing is that law school is a whole different creature. And the single biggest, well, there are two differences I focus on when people ask me about. One is the idea that you go an entire semester without anyone giving you feedback on whether you understand what you need to understand to take the exam. And then you take the exam, and then you start your next semester, and 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later, you finally get your grades. And only then do you know if you really knew what you were doing or not. And it's a really scary thing, and 30-40% of the people who are sitting with you are probably gone at that point. And so it's a traumatic experience. And the pervasive feeling I had through my 3 years, and I'm not a great studier, not a great student, Freddie, but the feeling I had was that no matter how much work I put in, I never felt like I was done. I could never really relax. There were certainly hours where I didn't do work, lots of time probably, but I never felt like the monkey was off my back, because there was always something else I could be doing. And since I didn't know what was demanded or required of me to get through this thing called law school, it was never comfortable.
Wow, that's interesting. Sort of so voluminous that you never finish.
You never know if you've briefed enough cases, if you've learned, and even if you've done everything that they've taught you to do, you still don't know if you've taken the right concepts. You don't know what's going to be asked of you on that final exam. And there's typically, although law schools differ and professors differ, the grade is often based solely on that final examination. And so there's no correcting it, there's no making up for it, there's no extra credit, there's no, I blew the midterm, but I can correct it on the final. There's nothing like that we have in undergrad experiences.
I like that you mentioned when I was a law student as well, I remember about 30-40% of the students had flunked out or disappeared. That was your experience as well. I went to Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and we had, I think, a lower rate of people who disappeared, but it was still significant. We still felt it. First year law school, you're typically assigned to a section of maybe 20 or 30 students, and through that whole first year, you have all the same classes together, so you can form study groups and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, you notice the people who are gone. Wow. Let's talk about the next leg of the trek to becoming a lawyer with the bar exam. When you finish law school, do you apply for the exam? Is that right?
You do. You petition, or you fill out a application for the exam. There's also a moral character exam, which isn't really an exam, but you're filling out paperwork about your history, and you need to be really truthful there. There's a guy from the one of the bar council, they call it in Washington, D.C., people in charge of disciplining lawyers for bad behavior. And he visited us and talked to us about how this was in our first year. And he said, listen, we have people who are members of the D.C. bar who were convicted murderers, rapists. Wow. As long as they've finished with their, the consequences of what's going on in their lives, and they're truthful on their application, their moral character application, that's not going to necessarily stand in their way. But if you lie about it, cover it up, you were 14 and got caught shoplifting, you think the bar's never going to find out about it. If they do, you're in for a world of hurt. because
Okay.
they're primarily concerned about your honesty and integrity. So don't be ashamed or embarrassed about what happened in your past. You need to divulge it.
Wow, thank you. That
Yeah.
excellent advice.
And then moving on from that, the moral character exam, the bar, it's a creature of itself. There's no, in my experience in life, there's been nothing like it. I don't know that I'll ever sit for a bar exam for another state, because it's just a tremendous, heart-rending event. And part of why that is, I think, Freddie, is because it's offered only twice a year. So you study for 2 or 3 or 4 months to get ready for this exam. That the anticipation kills you. And then you have 3 days here in California. It's a 3-day exam that is just, it's like running a marathon is all I can think of, or maybe 3 days in a row. And you finish and you walk out of there, and now you have to wait several months to find out whether you passed or not. And it's and so what do? You can't get a job because you've only got a couple months. Most people have that experience. You've just gone several months without work because you're preparing for this test, and you're sort of in no man's land, and just have to wait. And when you get those results, if you don't pass, and it took me a couple shots at it, if you don't pass, now you have to start the process all over again. You've got like 30 or 60 days before you start studying again. And so it's tortuous, and statistics and specific examples show that it's not a great predictor of whether you're going to be a good attorney or not. But it's all we've got. They haven't figured out what else to do. And so it tests you here in California on major areas of law covered in the state. Everybody participates in the multi-state bar exam, which is the middle day here in California, where you answer 200 multiple choice questions. And that A, B, C, or D is a lot tougher than it sounds.
Right.
But so that's the middle day of the exam, and everybody across the country takes that day. In California, we've got a day where you're answering short or middle-sized essay questions, and then you've got half a day that's spread out over the first and third days. And then the afternoons of those first and third days, you're doing a practical exercise in law where you're given essentially a case file, and you have to figure out how to solve what's in that file. And some other states have started adding that into theirs, but without adding a third day to it. They find a way to fit it into their first or second day. And it's in the end, it's not a terrible experience, but while you're going through it, it is.
Right. Okay.
And I think we had a Supreme Court justice, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, many years ago, who failed the New York bar 6 times before passing.
Wow.
So it's not a predictor of where you're going to end up, but it sure
Wow.
can hold you back for a while.
Wow, that's interesting. Let's talk about when you got out of law school. Do you recommend taking a bar prep, or do law schools generally prepare you for the exam?
No, most law schools do not. There are some, particularly some of the schools that are trying to crack into that accredited list, who will spend more time helping their students become prepared for the bar.
Okay.
But most law schools do not. You do cover a lot of the material, but not in the same way that the bar expects you to understand it or know it or be able to regurgitate it on game day. And so my experience was that my law school did not prepare me for the bar. And obviously that is a complicating factor. You graduate in May or June, and the next week you're preparing for the bar exam on subjects that you mostly studied 2 or 3 years prior. Because it is only testing for a basic knowledge of the law and how you apply facts to the law, so that they have some confidence that you can think like a lawyer, I guess. Think and write like a lawyer.
On the exam, we're looking at about 13 possible subjects that are going to be tested on that thing, or?
I think that's right in California.
Okay.
And there's a whole gamut of subjects, from family law to criminal law to constitutional law, property, and so on. And it's less than some states. Virginia and Nevada have a lot of sort of archaic law from Virginia. The Commonwealth of Virginia, I think, has 36 or 39 areas of law they test on. And they require you to wear a suit while you're taking the bar exam.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
With tennis shoes. because it's on a gymnasium floor and they don't want it marked up.
Is that right?
So
Oh my
everybody's
gosh.
a little different, but yeah. So,
Wow.
So
Well, let's-
California is not the most burdensome in terms of number of subjects, but I believe we are the leader in the lowest pass rate for the bar.
Okay.
That's attributed to both it being more difficult, but also the bar committee not wanting to let too many people. They only want the most qualified people admitted to the profession at one time.
Okay.
So frequently you see pass rates of 40 to 60%, whereas many other states may be 80 or 90%. And in fact, there's a handful of states, I don't remember how many, where if you go to law school in that state and you want to practice there, you're automatically admitted to the bar.
Okay. Okay.
We don't have that luxury.
So there's one more hoop that we need to jump through. Isn't that the professional responsibility side of it? There's a separate exam for that too.
That's
You want to touch on
correct.
that real fast for us?
Yeah, well, it's about your ethics and your morals and how you would deal with situations. Much of it is about the rules that guide our profession that we're responsible for knowing, understanding, and living up to. But it's also just about how I think you could probably pass that test with flying colors just by rote memorization, but I also think, at least in my case, I think it also tested me on what my instinct was in a particular situation.
Okay.
But it is, with adequate preparation, it is not too dissimilar from tests you took as an undergrad, not as an attorney. It's not an overwhelming burden like the bar exam.
Okay, yeah, because I noticed on the bar exam in California that there is a professional responsibility side, and there's also a separate exam for the professional responsibility side. They want to make sure that we've got competent,
Right, well,
ethical attorneys around here.
The one they're looking into your background and confirming everything you've told them is true, and that they feel that you haven't made the kind of errors that are red flags,
Okay.
for someone who's going to be a member of the bar.
Mhm.
On the other hand, as you're pointing out, there is this test that is primarily about the rules of professional responsibility in California. And so they really are doing everything they feel they can to ensure that people are going to be responsible members of the bar, that they're going to represent the bar the way that it ought to be. And yet, we still read every week about people who get in trouble for dealing with their clients' money or cases in a way that's not living up to those responsibilities.
Ouch.
But there's only so much you can do, and then people are responsible for their behavior. But it is a mountain you have to climb. And when people ask me about their interest in going through that process, I say you have to really want it. And
Okay.
it can't be your driving force. Well, the rewards may be there. Your driving force can't be about money.
Okay.
Because that's not going to, the vast majority of people end up wanting to do something other than some aspect of law that might be well-paying.
Okay. So let's recap. So the three hoops we need to become an attorney. We need the bachelor's. We need a law degree. We need to pass a moral character background check, the professional responsibility test, and the bar exam.
And you have to pay for it all.
All right. Oh my gosh. So, let's talk about the money. What if we don't have any money? Are there any other scholarships or loans that can help us?
Well, traditionally, lawyers can make a pretty fair living, and so there are banks and other institutions willing to lend us the money to go to law school. And I think the majority of students are taking on a significant burden with regard to financing their legal education. Most people don't have it themselves, or their families don't have that kind of money. Law school is incredibly expensive. The problem that I see people running into is not whether or not they can borrow the money. Most people can finance the education. The problem is what kind of position that puts them in once they've graduated and have to pay it back. And there's a lot of people who I think go to law school wanting to work for a nonprofit, wanting to work for a government agency, wanting to do something that they feel is immediately giving back to society, working for the greater good. And when they graduate and they have $1,500 or $2,000 a month payments just to keep up with their loans, I think a lot of people realize they can't do what they thought they were going to do with their law degree, and they get trapped. They may be very good at it, and some of them may end up liking it, but a lot of people I think end up working in an area of law that isn't interesting to them and is very depressing to them.
Wow. Because
they're trying to keep up with not only their loan payments, but the lifestyle that maybe they feel they have to adopt. And so that's a sad piece of the cost of law school financially. And I think that that can be avoided. But if when you write your essay for law school and you're saying all these things you want to do for the environment or for animals or for homeless or whatever it is that's in your heart, you got to keep that in mind when you're signing off to borrow these funds, because it can really interfere with that.
Do you recommend doing some sort of an internship before we go to work outside of law school, or can we just go get a job once we pass the bar?
Yes and yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think interning or getting summer positions in a variety of areas of law, even if you think you know what you want to do, is probably really valuable.
Okay.
Because once you get that first job out of law school, it's hard to change.
Mm-hmm.
People do it, but you may feel like you're giving up what you've earned at
Mm-hmm.
that point. So if you do it during law school, I think you're at a great advantage. And I did, both with my summers and during semesters, I did as many of those as I could. And I
Okay.
did stuff involving mediation and dispute resolution, and I worked for, I did an internship with a environmental group,
Mhm.
and I worked for a small bankruptcy firm, and I worked for a judge of the Superior Court
Mhm.
who at the time had mostly a family law docket, but it was a different experience.
Mhm.
And I think without that experience, it would be really hard to decide that you're really committed to a particular area of law.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I think it's important. Now, on the other hand, there are lots of people who do really well in law school. Maybe they go to a highly regarded law school or high-ranked law school, and it's not difficult they get like a big summer job their second summer,
Mhm.
and they're offered a job upon a graduation at a big firm for good money. And not that that's a bad way to go, but what if you haven't given yourself a chance to see what else is out there.
Okay.
And within the world of law, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of avenues
Mhm.
for a career. And one thing that stayed with me, and this was true for doctors that I talked to when I never really considered medicine, but no doctor ever said they advised me to go into medicine. And that was true with all the lawyers that I knew,
Mhm.
is that they all said, you'll hate it, don't go to law school.
Really?
Nobody that I ran into was happy with what they did in law.
Okay.
And so I think and I think they typically went that route of the goal is to get the high-paying summer job
Mhm.
and get an offer for a big firm job.
Mhm.
You work a lot of hours, you have a lot of responsibility, they're often mistreated,
Mhm.
but they make good money.
Mhm.
And that's the image that maybe a lot of people feel, that if they don't get that, they haven't succeeded.
Mhm.
But I ran into so many people who've been doing that for years who didn't feel that they succeeded.
Okay.
And so that was never an avenue for me.
Mhm.
But I know a lot of people who've taken it, some of whom are very happy with it, and
Okay.
others aren't. But so you can just get that job.
Mhm.
But the practical experience, I think, is very useful, not only for bolstering your resume,
Mhm.
but also it's extremely valuable for knowing that you're picking something that's really true to you.
Mhm. You used to be a prosecutor, isn't that right?
Well, yeah, that was the program in Maryland. when
Okay.
So my last semester of law school, so roughly 6 months, I was
Okay.
prosecuting.
Okay.
And I handled a trial, and
I see. Okay.
I handled some serious matters, and I handled the courtroom, but it was always with supervision.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Once we start working in whatever field it is, or once we have our license to practice, can we choose any area of law to go in? I mean, whether it's criminal or civil or.
Once you've been barred,
Mhm.
you can do anything in the state of California. You can do any area of law you want.
Mm-hmm.
And many people try to practice multiple areas of
Mhm.
law, some of them more successful than others. I
Mhm.
find it a tremendous, I don't mean burden in a bad way, but it is a tremendous burden to stay current with the issues of just criminal and DUI defense.
Mhm.
And I'm stymied sometimes when I see someone who practices family law and real estate law and criminal law, and I couldn't do that.
Uh-huh.
So you aren't bound by any rules of what you can and can't do, so long as you're representing your clients in a professional, knowledgeable way where you're not harming their interests.
Okay.
I think that's the key that the bar and the bar committee would be focused on, is if something went wrong, did this person hold themselves out to be capable of this representation without the proper knowledge. So, you know, every area of law, you're dealing with people's lives, whether it's about their money, about their health, about their freedom. And if you miss something because you're spread out amongst various areas of law, you're putting them at risk and you're putting yourself at risk. So, so you're only bound by your capability as an individual.
Okay. Let's switch gears for a minute. A typical day around here. Now, we're doing criminal law exclusively in this office. Is that right?
Exclusively, yes.
Okay. Take us through a typical day as a criminal law attorney.
All right. Well, court starts at 8:30 in most locations. When I say most locations, in this county alone, we have over 40 courthouses.
Wow.
They are consolidating that somewhat. In surrounding counties, they have anywhere from 1 to a dozen courthouses, and we handle cases from as far away as Santa Barbara County down to San Diego County. We'll go inland in San Bernardino and Riverside, up north to Kern County. Sometimes we're driving hundreds of miles a day. Most of our practice is focused in the LA area, however. Our office here in Hollywood, it's obviously more convenient not to, but you go where the clients want you. And occasionally that means going as far afield as Fresno or San Francisco or Sonoma County up in the Bay Area. Generally, it's not real practical. We're not as familiar with the individual courthouses, judges, district attorneys, and obviously travel is an expense. Occasionally, though, you have a client who either knows you personally or has a friend that's used you and they don't want to trust anyone else with their case. But normally, we start court at 8:30 in the morning in whatever courthouse and courtroom our clients have a matter in. As a criminal defense attorney, we're in court almost every day.
Wow.
Sometimes multiple courts. Today I was in a juvenile case in Kenyon Juvenile Justice Center in South Central. My associate was in court in the northern part of the county. So it really varies. Tomorrow morning I'll be in Malibu. So we move around. I like Malibu because about 1 out of 3 times out there, if I pull over, I'll see dolphins. So it's a nice way to start the day. But so we go to court, and we spend a chunk of our mornings in court. Sometimes it's just a few minutes. Sometimes it's all the way through the lunch hour or beyond. And so our mornings are typically focused on court and dealing with client matters. We come back to the office by midday most of the time, and then that's when we either work on matters in the office related to the cases that we're handling, maybe tomorrow or the next day, but we're also meeting with clients. Current clients come in for updates or for questions they may have or to make decisions in how we're actually going to proceed in the case. And it's also when we meet with new possible clients. We call them potentials. And we do a lot of those in the afternoons.
Can you touch on some of the types of cases that we work on? I mean, is it murder cases? Or
Sure. We have a murder case in the office right now. Those are hard because obviously if you don't do something significant to help your client, they're looking at a life sentence. It's non-negotiable, really. There has to be some serious issue with the case for that not to result in a life sentence if your client's found guilty. So it's as serious as it gets. And they are very demanding. A tremendous amount of work's involved because the more serious the case in terms of what the punishment might be, the more responsibility I think there is. Now we try to treat every one of our clients with the same care, whether you come in with a speeding ticket, we don't do a lot of traffic, we do some, or whether you come in with a murder case. We want to make you feel like you're the most important client to us. And I think that's really evidenced by the reception we get in the community. We like to hold everyone's hand and make them feel that we're really taking care of them. But there is a lot more stress when someone's facing prison time or particularly a life sentence, absolutely. But we do cover the spectrum. We do some traffic. We do a lot of DUIs. We do a lot of domestic violence, a lot of drug cases. But you get a lot more serious cases, assault with a deadly weapon, carjacking, murder, sexual assaults, assault on a police officer.
You had mentioned that you represent murderers. How do people react to you actually representing a murderer?
Alleged murderers.
Right?
No, I mean, I understand your reaction, and that's a great question, because there's this juxtaposition of people who will say, wow, how do you represent criminals? How do you represent someone who does that? And I said, well, when I'm representing them, we don't know that they've done it. They're accused of doing it. But more importantly, the Constitution guarantees people these various rights. And this case, it's not enough that the police decided that the investigation led to you, Freddie, and we think you killed your neighbor, right? It has to be that they have to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you did it. And short of that, you're not a convicted killer, right? You've been accused of it. Now, I could walk out of my business today. I could go downstairs, and somebody might have robbed a bank here in Hollywood. That happens a lot, or at least it used to. And I might be dressed just like the robber, and I could get arrested. Does that mean I did it? Right? So we have to be very careful about how we perceive people who are accused of committing a crime. Now, often the police do their job correctly, and they may have the right person. But the perception is that they're all guilty because they've been accused, they've been arrested, and that's far from the case. We had a young man who was involved in alleged to be involved in a series of robberies, armed robberies, very serious. And I think the initial offer from the prosecutor was like 76 years. Wow. It was about a year ago. Young man, 17 years old. They were trying him as an adult. He had supposedly three accomplices. And the prosecutor and the law enforcement agency involved, I can't remember if it was the sheriff or LAPD, had misidentified him. They had included pictures in what we call a six-pack. So it shows, you would have seen them on TV shows, but it's 6 pictures of similarly looking people that a witness would pick them out of in a lineup, like a live lineup, but it's a photographic array. And they had put the wrong picture in of a different individual, but they identified it as my client. And that was the whole basis for his arrest and time in custody. And we showed them the error, and the case was dismissed against our client. So that's not the rule. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens often enough. And if that young man had not been represented by someone who cared about defending him, had not gone through the paperwork, not figured out that the wrong photo was there, he could have gone to prison for the rest of his life. And I know that happens. And so we're there to stop that from happening. We're there to stand shoulder to shoulder with our clients and make sure that they're treated as the law requires them to be treated, whether they're guilty or innocent. And without that, a lot of people will be mistreated, as they have in the past in various parts of our history, where people were not given that kind of representation, were not given that right to defend themselves against false accusations. I don't want to go off on a big tangent here, but studies show over and over again that eyewitness identification is horribly flawed, very inaccurate, and yet it's the single biggest thing that is relied upon for catching criminals. And so, and you've got things like the Innocence Project with Barry Scheck runs, and where they're getting people off death row every year who they prove weren't the person that they were that witnesses testified that they did it. So it's really important, the role that we serve, I think, and it's
I agree.
Yeah.
Sixth Amendment. I wanted you to touch on, if it's a criminal matter and the courts can provide a public defender, isn't that true? Why would I be best served by a private attorney like yourself as opposed to a free public defender?
Sure, that's a great question. We have a lot of our potential clients come in and ask that question. And it's a tough one to answer, but my stock answer is essentially there's probably a lot of good public defenders out there. I know a few of them that I think are probably excellent, might be brighter than me, might be more capable, and they certainly have a lot of experience because they have such a big caseload. The problem is even the brightest star in the public defender's office is burdened by a tremendous load of cases. And so what we see, not always, and again there are exceptions, notable exceptions, and probably a lot of them, but there's also, in that system, there is the problem of a private attorney who might have 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50 cases in their office, sometimes even more, versus a public defender who might have hundreds, who might not have support staff like a private attorney has, who is more apt to become numb to a lot of the cases they see, who sees so many defendants who maybe don't take responsibility for doing the simplest things they've been instructed to do by their public defenders, that they're unable to keep up the fortitude to really service all of their cases. And we see that a lot. But now, I don't want to bash the public defender's office. It's a noble office, and the charter is correct. The problem is that they don't have the budget. They don't have the manpower, and so when no matter how good you are at this, if you have day in and day out more cases than you can keep track of, it's really hard, I think, for anyone to give it your best all the time, because your best starts to lack, because nobody has that energy. Now, on the other hand, there's probably plenty of private attorneys, and I've witnessed a lot of this, who will do you more of a disservice than that. Ours is a profession not unlike other professions in that we're all human. And just like you might have a lousy experience with someone at the grocery store or the post office or the DMV or at the gas station, whatever, you can also have those experiences with a lawyer. And so there are many people who, and I alluded to this before, they're trying to run both a business and be a good lawyer. And sometimes that's a tremendously difficult balance to strike. And so I think that you run into people who can't balance it, and they feel like, we've got an overhead, we've got to meet that. We're just going to sign up as many cases as we can. We're going to charge small just so we bring them in. And it's hard not to do that. We try, and I think we succeed at not doing that in this office, but it can be tough, particularly when you're first starting out.
Okay. Now, if I'm a criminal defendant and I have the choice of either paying a private attorney like yourself or having a public defender, it sounds like I can get maybe easier to get you on the phone, easier to get some of your time. You have more resources, more time, maybe a staff. Is there sort of a possibility that a district attorney might respect my case a little bit better with a private attorney? Would I be more apt to get a better plea bargain with a private attorney, or is that just sort of hooey?
No, it can be true, but as I said a minute ago, it's not always true, because just because you pay the money to hire a private attorney doesn't mean they're going to do the work for you.
Okay.
Again, I don't want to focus the negative on the public defender's office. We see a lot of private attorneys going into court and pleading their clients out on the first date.
Wow. Okay.
That's less than the public defender would do for them, almost certainly. Okay. And so you don't just ask a prosecutor for a deal and they just say yes. Not usually, anyway. When they do, you're like, whoa, what's really wrong with this case? It's a process. There's negotiation. There's give and take. It takes time usually. It's very, and so would you get that from the public defender? Sometimes. But again, because of how burdened they are, and you mentioned about phone calls, a lot of the time we have people who initially selected the public defender to represent them, but have decided to hire private, and in part it's because they never get their phone calls returned. I would never badmouth a public defender for that, because I know they're getting hundreds of calls. Every one of their clients is making a phone call. There's no time in the day to do it. They can't do what the bar would hold me up to a certain standard. And whatever that standard is, and it differs by area of law and experience and where we're practicing, what part of the country or in the city, out of the city. But whatever that standard is, it's got to be less for the public defender, because they don't have the time that we have for each case. If you divide the day up into 24 hours and they've got 300 cases, they got to sleep sometime. And so I'm using that number. I don't have. That's not I'm picking that out of what I see going on, but they're very burdened and without the resources. Some of them, it's admirable how quickly they can return a call, but most of the clients that have started that way who come into my office say that they've been calling them for weeks, they can't get a hold of them. And again, they're angry with it, I try to let them know it's not the individual's fault. It's the lack of resources.
Okay, we're still on a typical day as a criminal defense attorney, so we're in court just about every day.
Most
Sounds like-
days,
okay.
yeah, it's nice. Once in a while, we have a morning free of court, and we can come in and get more done, or maybe
Okay.
catch a couple hours of sleep. But more often than not, we're in court every day.
Okay.
And for there's three types of I guess criminal activity. There's infractions like a speeding ticket, things like that. There's misdemeanors, which are a more minor crime, and then there's felonies, which are a serious crime. And in California, the Penal Code 977A allows us to appear on misdemeanors without our clients present in most circumstances.
Okay.
And so because we go to different courts and we're not sure what time we're going to get where, how quickly we'll get through court in Van Nuys and get onto Pasadena or what have you, what happens is that we let our clients know that unless they really want to come see the criminal justice system working, go to work, go to school, sleep in, do whatever you're going to do. You don't need to be in court. When it comes to felonies here, most of the time our clients do need to be present.
Okay.
So for felony matters, our clients need to be present. We try to show up for their cases first.
Okay.
Once we've proceeded with that case, if we have another case somewhere else, then we move on.
Okay, so our afternoons kind of set aside for discovery types of issues or trial
Afternoons,
preparation?
after we get back to the office, we're returning client calls or emails. We get a lot of clients emailing us now. We are talking to new potential clients, taking calls from new potential clients. We have hearings on the phone or in person with the Department of Motor Vehicles over people's driving privilege.
Okay.
We have current clients coming into the office, questions, payments. Sometimes we've resolved their case, but they're still not going to come to court if it's a misdemeanor, and we can fill out the paperwork here, have it notarized, and they can avoid the whole inconvenience of coming to court. And this can be scary for a lot of people.
Good deal. Let's switch gears for a minute. Let's talk about the pros and cons of being a lawyer or a criminal lawyer. What do you love about this career?
It's multifaceted, and solutions can come quickly.
Okay.
My experience in law school working in other areas of law taught me that, and friends who were attorneys and seeing what it was like in these big firms, it can take forever to get results, and you can be very isolated.
Okay.
Doing a lot of research, a lot of writing. You're focused on billable hours a lot of the time. In criminal law, what I like about it again is that there's so many things in play, and your workday looks different every single day.
Okay.
And so while certain kinds of cases can become somewhat repetitive, somebody is arrested for DUI and their blood alcohol's 0.09 and they're just turned 21. You get a lot of cases kind of like that, but each one has a different story. The reason the officer stopped them, the way the officer described it, but even taking that aside, there's hundreds of different kinds of cases we see every year, if not more than that. And different venues, different judges, different courthouses, different backgrounds for the defendants, their ages, their family stories. One of the big responsibilities that I feel I have, and one of the most influential things that I can do in representing my clients, is to humanize them. Well, particularly in a criminal case, when the district attorney or the city attorney or whoever the prosecuting agency is, when they pick up that file in the morning off their desk, they see on the tab a case number and maybe the charges, or it's on a placard on it, or they have to open the page. But all they're looking at is a bunch of numbers, and those numbers mean something to them. I mean, it was a domestic violence case, and this is this guy's second time, and there was alcohol involved, and it's a case number. They probably don't even look at the name of the person, or if they do, it's a casual glance. This isn't a person, this is a case. And so when I get close to the prosecutor and get their ear, a big part of what I accomplish in trying to make this better for my clients is that I tell their story. And I humanize them and I make them a person, because I feel strongly that they can't ignore, they're not just a criminal. They're a person with a family situation, an immigration situation, a job situation, a schooling situation, a parenting situation. All these things that now the DA has to relate to them. They have things in common. What if this happened to me? what if I was in this situation? How would I deal with it? Maybe this person, it was an accident. By doing that, you tap into the empathy of the prosecutor.
Okay.
And you give them a reason to listen to your request for something out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many other attorneys do this. I know many who do,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there are also many who do not.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that that's probably the most important thing that we do, aside from listening to our clients,
Okay.
is turning them into a person in front of the prosecutor.
Humanizing your clients. Okay, so you're helping people, right? Helping them stay out of jail or live a healthier life, getting back to work, getting back to their lives,
Absolutely.
type of thing.
Yeah. Well, the consequences of being convicted of a crime or pleading guilty or no contest to a crime can be far-reaching beyond maybe a little jail time.
Mm-hmm.
It can impact the kind of work you can do. You can lose your job. You can lose your ability to get student loans. Family members can abandon you. It's stigmatizing and obviously demoralizing for the individual. And so when we come in and we're able to improve the situation, sometimes in a major way, other times in a more minor way, it always, almost always makes our clients feel really good.
Cool.
And much better than they felt previously. So.
What is not so fabulous about this career, the cons of this game?
Well, I touched on one of the biggest difficulties for me as the owner of my own firm is that sometimes I do miss working for another firm where they gave me my work. I didn't have to worry about finding my work. And every 2 weeks I got a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something nice about going home and being free of any concerns most of the time, unless you're preparing for trial or something like that. But when I opened my own doors, working on 7 years now, I have to do it all. Not only do I have to be that lawyer from 9 to 5, or really it's a 24-hour job, but somewhere in there I have to figure out how to run the business, how to work on my advertising, how do I bring in new clients and maintain relationships and network and pay the bills and pay my employees and finances and decoration and furniture. I mean, everything is in my hands. And to strike a balance there is sometimes incredibly challenging. And I don't regret being in business for myself, Freddie, but it is something that sometimes I don't love about what I do.
Okay.
Is having to strike that balance, because a lot of times it means that I'm choosing I'm required to basically choose not to put my best effort into one aspect of my job.
Okay, that's interesting. Let's talk about money. A lot of people want to go to law school and become a lawyer to make big bucks. What can a first-year associate expect to make today as a lawyer? Is there a ballpark number out there? Or?
First of all, dry cleaning's expensive. So
that's a good point. And clothes.
Picking a job where you have to wear a suit every day isn't necessarily the best way to make a lot of money. A first-year associate at one of those big firms we talked about before can still do extremely well. Obviously, places like Manhattan and Los Angeles, very well is not objective. I mean, the cost of living is much higher. I remember when I was in high school, somebody worked for a big firm in San Francisco, and they came in and talked to my class, and they could afford the $80,000 Porsche, which was a nice Porsche back then. Okay. But they didn't have any time to drive it. Right? You go to one of those big firms and you 2,000, 2,500 billable hour requirements. A lot of those Manhattan firms, the lawyers are sleeping under their desks.
Wow.
It's not uncommon. Yeah. So there's a balance that you want to strike. There are those $100,000 to $150,000 starting positions. They're fewer and further between than they were 10 years ago. There are a tremendous number of lawyers who've been laid off over the last decade. Associates at these firms who thought they were on a partner track, that they were never going to have to fish for their own dinner their whole life. They thought they were going to be with this firm. Now they're out there and they're hungry and they're willing to work for even $20 an hour for someone with 7 years experience.
Wow.
You can get an experienced attorney with a lot of experience and knowledge for $20 to $40 an hour right now.
Wow.
And so that makes it really hard to come out of law school and
Mhm.
command some kind of salary.
Mhm.
There are a lot of people. I had a young woman who talked to me who had graduated from an Ivy League school
Mhm.
with top honors,
Mhm.
law school, and she couldn't find work.
Wow.
She was a nice woman. There was nothing wrong with her that I
Mhm.
could, detect. But she was unable to find work commensurate with what her skills and
Mhm.
her what she had accomplished. And so there are a lot of first-year attorneys that can't find work.
Mhm.
And then there are those that can are probably happy to make $40,000, $50,000 right now, which isn't
Mhm.
a lot considering how much you've invested in time and energy and money.
Mhm.
I think that getting the experience and networking is
Mhm.
the single most important thing you can do
Mhm.
to avoid that. Because while you have to have the basic skills and basic grades of a certain level to be competitive for a position, getting out there and knowing someone is the most important thing you can do. Because if a firm's HR office gets 1,000 applications, you're just another application. I don't care what your qualifications are.
Yeah.
It's going to be the person whose cousin, met you at a party and said, "Hey, uncle, you should give this guy an interview."
Mhm.
And so it's really about finding people that you know. I think it's very important.
Okay.
So the jobs just aren't lying around out there
Mhm.
like they have it sometimes in the past.
Okay. Because there's so many lawyers today in California, right? With all the students that have recently graduated in the past 10, 15 years, whatever.
Yeah, well, I think nationwide it's something like 1 in 300 people is an attorney.
Is that right?
I
Okay.
went to school in Washington D.C. and it's like 1 in 37.
What?
And so
Wow.
you throw a rock, you're probably going to hit a lawyer.
Oh my gosh.
Here in LA, there's a lot, but it's tough. And I run into people who are willing to work for very little just to stay busy right now. So that's not. I wouldn't go so far as to say now's not the time to go to law school,
Mhm.
but I think you not only need to be serious and understand what the cost is,
Mhm.
but you have to be very committed to finding a path and not just waiting for it to happen to you,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of people who are probably serving coffee with law degrees right now in LA.
Wow. Okay. So if we don't come straight in, like for yourself, and open up our own shingle, if we go into, say, a law firm of the bigger side, like you said, that might be in downtown Los Angeles, we can probably expect to get benefits, health and dental, and maybe a generous salary.
Yes,
If-
it's possible.
I mean, it's out there.
Yeah, you want to be careful, particularly here in California. I think we're the only state that has unaccredited law schools where a graduate is allowed to take the bar exam.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is that you've got all these people taking on similar or even greater debts to get this unaccredited education,
Mhm.
because either it was a more flexible program for their needs or they couldn't get into some other program. But you're going to have a great deal of difficulty getting respect from the bigger firms when you graduate like that. A second or third job, you might have no problem moving in with those firms, but off the bat, I don't think they do a lot of hiring for people in that situation. I think correction there. Besides working for the prosecutor's office in Maryland, where I got some of that valuable experience, I did work for a small firm in Pasadena,
Okay.
a small defense firm, before going out on my own.
Okay. Well,
Um,
good deal. We always close with a funny story of some sort. Can you touch on something funny that happened under your office while you're working as a criminal defense lawyer?
Wow, that's a great
Or maybe
question.
something interesting that
Well, this is more anecdotal.
Mhm.
I would never say this is a thankless job. We have a lot of people who are incredibly grateful for the work we do. What's interesting about it is you have to take that gratitude wherever you can find it, because it's really, when I take a deposit for a new retainer, it feels good, right? I'm doing business, I'm doing my job. That feeling doesn't last very long. When I help somebody in court, or they're really thankful and they make me blush in the hallway outside the courtroom, that stays with me for a lot longer.
Okay.
What's odd or funny about it is that most of the time, the clients who are the most grateful, who are effusive and they overdo it, and yesterday I was blushing in the Beverly Hills courthouse because mother and daughter just couldn't stop going on and on about how great I was. I didn't do a lot for them, and that's what's funny about it, is that those are the people who seem to be the most grateful is the ones you held their hand and you got them through the situation. But it didn't take a lot of great lawyering. It just took being a good person. Mm-hmm. And then there's the people you accomplished something almost unimaginably great for, who could care less that you helped them out. And I'm not ungrateful to them. They don't owe me that. Mm-hmm. But I've learned over the years I just have to take pleasure in those that, even if I don't think I did much for them, be happy that they feel good about what I did for them.
All right, good deal. Do you have any advice for young people you want to share before we wrap it up?
You know, I think that lawyer or attorney is a title, just like doctor or paramedic or farmer, or, you know, any profession. I think what's important is to not be so attracted by the title, but to learn something about what it's really like. I think the label can be not only disconcerting, but can set you up to feel like a failure, because if you throw yourself into something and only after you've spent $100,000 or $300,000 figure out it's not really what you wanted to do, you're going to have a lot of anxiety and a lot of discomfort, and so investing the time and energy before you commit to something like law school in finding out what it's really all about and what you think you might like to do with it, unlike the way I did it, is probably really a great idea. And I'm always available by email or phone or even an in-person meeting to talk to young people who are considering this.
Good deal. There you have it. How to be a criminal defense lawyer. Daniel, thank you.
Hey, thank you, Freddie.
We appreciate it.
Well, there you have it. Now you know what it takes to become a licensed attorney in the state of California. I want to thank Mr. Perlman for joining us today. Live in the Sunset Strip in Hollywood, California, this is Freddy Cochran for California Careers. Take care.